Today's gospel makes no sense whatsoever. You've got to be kidding. Cut my hand off? No way. Cut my foot off if it causes me to sin? Come on, let's get serious. It's not going to happen. Pluck my eyes out? Forget about it. If we all took your advice, Jesus, the world would be full of one-eyed, one-armed, one-legged, gimpy people. That's ridiculous. You're crazy. I can't believe you want me to amputate and disfigure my own body if that part causes me to sin. Is that really what you want me to do, Jesus? And the answer is, of course, no. Jesus does not want us to do that. He wants to emphasize, though, how sin can disfigure our own lives. Jesus uses a figure of speech called a hyperbole. And Webster's dictionary defines hyperbole as a deliberate exaggeration used for an effect, an extravagant statement not intended to be understood in the literal sense. I'll read that again. A deliberate exaggeration used for an effect, an extravagant statement not intended to be understood in the literal sense. We've all used hyperboles in our life. Some examples. When that car cut me off on the Edens Expressway, I got to shot the guy. Or if you use another word like that, young man, I'm going to cut your tongue out. Or even on a better side, if somebody gets a good job and you kind of envy him and you might say, man, I just kill for a job like that. There's all hyperboles used to make a point. One scripture scholar called this gospel regarding the amputation of our hands and our feet and our eyes as a surgical hyperbole. A surgical hyperbole. It's a surgical hyperbole as is necessary to amputate a person's diseased arm, limb, or foot. In a normal surgical operation, this is surgically because we should remove some of the sins and the bad habits that we come in our lives. We can surgically remove them. What are some of these examples of the, I should call it a spiritual amputation? A spiritual amputation. And what are some examples of the spiritual amputation that keep us from entering into sin? One amputation one might consider for our life is alcohol abuse. Do we drink too much? Or another spiritual amputation that occurs in our society is the abuse of drugs, and that's prescriptional or recreational. And one can touch on all of the 7 capital sins for amputation, and they're called capital sins because they encourage other sins and vices. Sins, and the capital sins are pride, anger, lust, gluttony, greed, sloth, envy. Those are just all, they're known as, sloth, of course, is known as laziness. If we are honest with ourselves and we look in the mirror every morning, some of these capital sins are applicable to many of us. And sin doesn't always come in big sizes. Sin really starts usually small. And then it begins to take a small hold in us, and it gets bigger and bigger. And then it doesn't take too long before this sin, our road to heaven, it doesn't take too long before our road to heaven takes a detour towards the road to Gehenna, and it's unquenchable fire. It's because of Gehenna that through the centuries, hell has been pictured as a place of unquenchable fire and torture. And here's some background on how this picture of hell derived from Jesus' description of Gehenna today. Gehenna actually is a low valley south of Jerusalem, and it's a garbage dump. It was the garbage dump for Jerusalem and all the surrounding communities. And so how did they get rid of their filth and all the worms and everything else? They burned the garbage. The garbage is burning 365 days, 24 hours a day. It was perpetually on fire. Gehenna then, and this is fire that Jesus is talking about, took the meaning of hell all down through the ages because it was there, it stunk, they could see it, and it was not a place to be. As an aside, all garbage dumps, of course, bring worms because worms love food, and hence the saying of Jesus, where the worm does not die and the fire is never extinguished. Here is the origin of the place, so that's the idea. This is the origin as hell, as a place of fiery and perpetual punishment. And this is the common acceptance what hell is like. But really what's the correct definition of hell? Well, you're not going to get it from me. But from the readings I've done, here's a couple of observations that I've read. First of all, hell is real. While the image of hell as a place and time or a fire and brimstone may be symbolized, hell is real. Jesus' message is clear. It is imperative that we do everything possible to avoid eternal damnation. Church teaching clarifies the nature of hell by maintaining that it is not a place. Hell is not a place, but a state or a way of being. It's this way of being, so to speak, that a person suffers the penalty of eternal damnation from God. And that is hell, eternal damnation from God. And because as God has given every one of us a free will, a will that we make the choice. We make the choice of whether we'd rather spend an eternity with God or without God. When we die, we will be judged by God on the choices that we made in this life. We determine our own faith, or fate, so to speak. We make the choice. Is it up, door number 1, heaven, or is it down, door number 2, hell? There is no door number 3. In closing, hopefully today, in the Gospels, you learned why hell is depicted as fire and brimstone because of the short history of Gehenna and the garbage dump. And you hopefully have also learned what a hyperbole is, how we can use it in the gospel. Well, Jesus had a sense of humor, and this has been a serious homily. I think I would like to close with this little thought. If someone comes up to you and tells you to go to hell, you can tell them that's a hyperbole, and it's a hell of a poor idea.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this celebration of the Mass. This virtual Mass is broadcast to hundreds of people every day of the week. You know, over 100 years ago, the very first celebrations of the Mass took place on the second floor of the Glenview Public House. It's been inconceivable that 100 years later, we would be reaching so many people all over the world through this technology. If you'd like to support the ongoing broadcasts of OLPH's Masses, please go to our website, go to Give Central, and you'd be able to support the ongoing outreach of this virtual ministry. Thank you for your support. Most of all, thank you for joining us in prayer. God bless you.
Wasn't that great? Oh my gosh, that fourth quarter, they were amazing. Yeah, there was no way to